So I welcome everybody to our 9th webinar on building electrification in New Jersey. And we're really privileged tonight to have the guest speaker from Iceland. And he'll be talking about all what I think is great things about Iceland and that reduces greenhouse gas. But he is also going to talk about some of the problems they have of actually getting down to closer to net zero. So we'll hear a lot more about it in a second. I've been showing my pictures from Iceland. The bottom picture shows thermal hotspots, which you see all around the landscape in Iceland. And the hot water coming up, partly steam. The steam is jettisoned off, I guess, and the hot water is pumped over these long pipes, zigzagging around the last line step. This is a typical pipe. And they use the high pressure steam from deep underground to drive turbines, electrical turbines. They generate their electricity from the high pressure steam. There's a certain amount of contaminants that are coming up, not just water, but contaminants and also CO2. They take those contaminants and re-inject them back into the ground a distance away from where their uptake pressure line is. And then it's like a big loop. So they're taking contaminants back into the ground, and it's driving the generators, and they're generating electricity. And so I thought, oh, this is so envious. Iceland has its made. The heating is free from geothermal, and the electricity is free from geothermal. Great, it's a really good deal. So the person that's going to set us straight is on the line now, Ingo. And Ingo, you're going to have to tell me I will mispronounce your name, but I know you're son of Matthíasson.
Yeah.
That's about all I know from that name. You'll have to introduce yourself. So
yeah.
I'll tell you a little bit about Ingo first. He's a resident of Iceland. We heard his talk about climate change and what Iceland is doing a month ago. I thought it would be really helpful for us to know, even though I'm envious, they have their problems. I had a hard time getting hold of Ingo earlier this week. He was up hiking in the mountains and following one of his passions, cave exploring. So he was not available. So I was just showing my collages, a few of the Iceland photos. You're going to see a lot more from Ingo. So I wanted to have you, Ingo, just take it away. I wanted to make one more comment. We got an emergency call tonight that the last person on the agenda was called back into work. And it looks like he's not going to be able to make it. So I told Ingo he could spend a little more time talking tonight. So with that, take it away.
And if you have questions for Ingo, please put them in the chat, and we'll answer questions at the end of his talk.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Ingólfur Páll Matthíasson, and people call me Ingo. I am a tour guide in Iceland, and I have been leading tours for 9 years on the glaciers here. And I have seen a lot of changes on the glaciers, even though I've been tour guiding relatively short period of time. And I give talks about climate change and sort of what Icelanders think of the matter and what they're doing accordingly to these threatening situations that we're heading into now for the future generations. And I give daily talks actually now. So I am gonna tell you a little bit about what the Icelandic perspective of the matter is and so on. I know that in the States it has been some sort of a controversial topic, whether humans are contributing to the Earth's temperature rising at this fast rate. Here in Iceland, it is not a controversial topic. It has been accepted by the educational system, by the public and the media and the politicians that humans are now accelerating the heat rising due to CO2 emissions. We're trapping in the heat much greater than it ever has done before. And it is now being taught in schools. It has been criticized at what age the kids should start to learn about climate change. Parents have been they have been disappointed when their kids have come home and started crying and got a completely breakdown when they learned about the seriousness of climate change from the teacher. But we also have, though, politicians, and we have deniers of climate change. We have here one particular party. So we have our political system is that we have several parties, and we vote for political parties to form a government for us, and they get all members in the parliament, 64 parliamentary members, and one small party thrives on getting votes where they can find votes, and they are saying loudly that climate change is just fraud and made in China or whatever to gain votes. So we have that as well here. But I'm gonna tell you a little bit about what we're doing in Iceland, and I'm gonna share my screen here, if possible. And I'm gonna start off with this. There we go. So yeah, I'm gonna start off with these cows. Icelanders are big time farmers, and we are big meat eaters like so many other nations. Here in Iceland, I wouldn't say it's a great problem like elsewhere, where there is lack of vegetation for these animals to eat around them, where there is shortage of water. It doesn't make any sense to be farming meat for human consumption. For that, it consumes a lot of water to farm meat, much more than if we were to farm vegetables. And at the same time, these cows are releasing a lot of methane into the atmosphere. But there is a man in Africa who has a different perspective, and he says that humans have extended the deserts of our earth by overhunting of these animals, hunting down the predators that were chasing them as well. So the grounds are no longer fertile like they used to. His name is Alan Savory, and you can look into his theory. It's an interesting theory. But we are all related to farmers here in Iceland, and what is the greatest contributor of CO2 emissions are these ditches that have been dug in the grounds here. There is a huge demand that farmers fill these ditches up again today. For that, the wetlands have been drained, and when you drain the wetlands, you can get grass growing on top of the soil, but at the same time you get bacteria coming into the soil, eating up dead vegetation that has been buried in the wetlands, that hasn't been like decaying, and it starts a biological reaction to the soil, and CO2 starts flowing out of these out of the soil into these ditches. So there's a continuous flow of CO2 coming out of these ditches, and farmers got paid for digging these ditches during the Second World War. Especially unemployed men got a lot of work hand digging these ditches. And then when machinery came to the story, then these ditches were dug everywhere in the wetlands, just all over. And it's really interesting that some of the fields are not even being used where the fields have been drained. Modern machineries, like the soil is still too wet for the fields to hold modern machines on them. But nowadays, the farmers can apply for some money to fill these ditches up again. And interesting is, though, that they aren't really participating, for my opinion. I met up with a woman who was doing studies on wetland birds. She was finishing her master's degree, I think, and she was studying wetland birds in Iceland, and she engaged with a lot of farmers, asking them about whether they were going to fill up the ditches and apply for some money for that. And most of them denied that they were not going to take any action in that. So it seems to have been, it seems to be not working, paying them off to fill these ditches up again. But surely we need to fill them up again. We got volcanoes in Iceland that contribute to the CO2 emissions, and it's really interesting to hear people add the volcanoes into the discussion of climate change. But from what I've read online is that volcanoes are emitting like 3% of the emissions that humans are creating. This is a picture from last year here, not too far from the airport. We had a fantastic show, actually. You're not too far from the city. So here we see a lot of changes, and here above we have Sólheimajökull glacier here further east in 97. The ice is coming down on the sands. Now there is a parking lot here where the ice used to be, and I hike a lot up on this glacier. And then we have 2012 here below. I have a different angle of this glacier here. Further, this is 99 above, and then 2019 below, the same spots, that same bridge. So we see a lot of changes on these glaciers. I hike up on this glacier on this glacier on a regular basis, and the ice tongue that is coming down from the main ice cap is receding up that valley about 100 up to 300 feet a year. So we are seeing a lot of changes. Here we have a waterfall in 2011. You can notice that the valley is almost full of ice, and then 7 years later, I have a different angle of this waterfall, so you sort of have to pay attention to the green moisture in the rocks. 7 years later, we have the ice receded a lot in the valley, and the waterfall has grown a lot. Icelanders have done a lot of deforestation throughout history, and sadly, we're not aiming at restoring the image that our ancestors took away from Iceland, or we could say we're not aiming at restoring the indigenous and natural forests like they used to be. But when the first settlers arrived, Iceland was full of birch trees from the mountain roots to the ocean, 30 feet tall birch trees. And then the Vikings cut it all down. And interestingly is that they were used to be using the forests in Norway without destroying the whole thing. But it seems that they went too far, and something happened. We're not entirely sure why they ruined the whole thing. But perhaps it was a different kind of soil. Natural disasters may have played its part as well. But we have good evidence both in our history and also here in the soil that there were 30 feet tall birch trees. There is, for example, here, not too far from where I am on the south coast, there are trees that were taken down in a glacier flood the year of 870, and they were washed away in an eruption, and it all points out to that there was a big forest in that area, that those trees had been buried in the sands for many years, and they only came from underneath the sands with the weather erosion now about 30 or 40 years ago. It's interesting to see. So we got a lot of proofs that there were great forests. But then this animal here came along, and with herd animals, it seems that Mother Nature always thought of it in a way that there would be predators chasing the herds and keeping them moving, keeping them away from these barren, naked landscape where there was less vegetation, where they would be easily caught, and therefore the predators, no matter if we like them or not, they play a huge role in the nature. But these animals were imported with Vikings, and these sheep are set free in the mountains here every summer. And if these sheep see a fresh young birch tree growing somewhere, they will eat them up instantly because they find the little birch trees delicious. But we are all related to farmers, and no one is allowed to criticize the farmers' right to set these sheep free in the mountains in the summer. It has been the farmers' right for now since the year of 870. And it seems that the politicians are really scared of coming close to this subject. They know that they would lose too many voters. So, but I think it's a really old-fashioned to set them free in the mountains. They should be fenced off. When it comes to our energy, 99.9% of the energy that we use for heating our homes and creating electricity is green source of energy, hydroelectric power or geothermal power. And these geothermal power plants are only located on top of the volcanoes, on active volcanoes. And this particular picture is not too far from the city of Reykjavik. It's only about a 20-minute drive out of the city, or maybe 30-minute drive. There, as Steve mentioned, we get the extremely hot water in such a high pressure that it is used to drive turbines and create electricity. And this is, of course, a really green source of energy, but it still whatsoever releases some gases. But right now, in this particular area where this power plant is, there is a new station opening for pumping CO2 with salt water into the ground, where that combines with the soil and becomes a solid rock in 2 years. So that is a new methodology to get rid of the CO2 out of the atmosphere. And now there are plans to import CO2 from abroad and pump it into the ground here not too far from the city. So we will be importing CO2 to Iceland at some point, it seems. But as I said, 99.9% of the energy that we use for electricity and housewarming is green source of energy. We do drive most all of our vehicles with fossil fuel. That is, though, changing really fast. But Iceland, when it comes to the source of energy, we do carbon credits. We are taking in a lot of extra pollution, you could say, from Europe. We're getting paid for taking in a lot of emissions, and that it works in a way that European nations agreed upon, that they would try to lower emissions, and those nations that would not find a greener source of energy would have to exchange their emissions or pay off to nations that have already found greener source of energy. And Iceland is doing really, really well. We've found we have only green source of energy here for housewarming and electricity. And therefore, Iceland is getting paid for taking in a huge amount of emissions. The problem with it is that we get really low amount of money for taking in that. Some say it is only extending the lifeline for heavy industry and nations that pollute heavily to carry on their ways. The prices should be raised. That is the concern, that the prices are too low. So technically, I was trying to figure out and find out how much Iceland was actually, if you were to take all those emissions that are created abroad into account and bring them over to Iceland, and then compare it with how much or how our electricity is made, you could actually say that 57% of electricity in Iceland is made with fossil fuel, because we take in so much pollution, and 30% with nuclear power. So this is the source of energy that we're exchanging. Of course, this is not happening.
Ingo. Yeah. Do you have a way to move the slides so to the right so that we can see the whole slide? There's a space.
Oh, here?
There.
Thank you.
You did it.
Okay, so you see it now, or okay?
You know, yes.
Okay, good. So air filtration stations are being planned both close to the city, and I wish I could tell you numbers of that now, but it's quite a lot of amount. So we're counting on science to help us, and in the north of Iceland, this is being planned up by a beautiful area called Húsavík in the northeast of Iceland. Here they intend to filter CO2 by using geothermal power and pump it into greenhouses that will also be there, warmed up with a geothermal hot water. And they will be farming something like tomatoes or something with CO2 they will be able to filter with the power out of the atmosphere. But of course, air filtering stations look like this, and they're beautiful, and we surely need more of them. But in Iceland, we have most of our glaciers on the south coast of Iceland, and they're vanishing rather quickly. I don't think, even though all humans on Earth will put their hands together, and the sooner the better, I don't think these glaciers will be saved in Iceland. Calculations tell that maximum 200 years they will last from now on, and there won't be a cooling period until way longer. So we are amongst the last generations to see the glaciers here in Iceland, but they're mostly located here on the southeastern part and the south coast, because underneath them are volcanoes, and as the winds bring in moisture from the oceans, those winds have cooled down and formed snowfall on top of these volcanoes. Icelanders we're seeing a few changes here. We see recycling happening. We got 4 or 5 containers in each house, but recycling is a problematic word for that. In Iceland, for example, we were recycling plastics now for years, and then it was actually taken care of by a private company in Sweden. And then it was discovered that this particular private company had just been dumping the plastics in an island somewhere in Asia. So that was stopped, and now there is a big warehouse full of Icelandic plastic in Sweden, and no one knows what to do with it. It's really funny to hear the environmental minister here continuously asking him about the plastics in Sweden, and the environmental minister has no idea what's going to happen to those plastics, but he always has some answer though. We're planting a huge amount of trees. The government is spending a lot of money on planting trees. It's very controversial to what they're doing at the same time as they're allowing sheep to roam freely and eating up birch trees that winds and birds are planting naturally. So we see a few things though changing here. Like 2030, it was decided that only electric cars or green source of power vehicles will be allowed to be sold here in the markets. And those who are buying new vehicles are only looking at electric. And we're seeing, but the problem is that the electric cars are quite expensive. They have been paid down recently, but unfortunately, because of how our how the economics are going right now after COVID in Iceland, they seem to be finding new ways to put on taxations in the government, and we are expecting the prices to rise also on electric vehicles next year due to increased taxes. So that is a big setback in motivating people to get electric vehicles. So certain things like plastic bags in 2021 were forbidden to be sold in the supermarkets, and people got furious for a whole week. And then people realized it's not a problem. You just grab a reusable bag with you, and it's easy, simple. You can still buy a carton bag if you forgot your reusable bag at home, and it's so easy. It was really interesting to see how many people were able to raise their voice and go all bananas about this particular decision. And then it turned out to be actually a really good decision. We're really happy with not buying plastic bags from the supermarkets any longer. Farmers ought to be filling up ditches, but they're not really doing that. Carbon offset companies are rising, and we got an Icelandic company, a big one now, that is that many companies are paying off to offset their carbon footprint, and that company aims at doing it in Iceland. But of course, when you can also offset your carbon footprint by paying off to companies in other countries, but it has been there has been a little discussion about that now, whether that is actually just justifying for other nations to not take care of their environment and sort of feeling better about offsetting it elsewhere. Education in schools about what to buy is increasing, and people are definitely, the younger generation is looking at the merchandise. There's more demand for merchandise having these little green signs on them, and those merchandise seem to be selling, for my opinion, in many cases better, like the toilet papers and such. People are paying attention whether that particular toilet paper was offset, and whether there were trees replanted. Vegetable eating is increasing here, and we see vegan options and vegetarian dishes rise up everywhere. Actually, scientists are saying in order for humans to stabilize the climate in the future, we will have to change our diets to maybe plant-based 3, 4, 5 days of the week, and that is wonderful. We are seeing a lot of changes in dietary habits here. If you would have been in Iceland 20 years ago and asked for a vegetarian meal, people would have shook their heads and said, what do you want, just potatoes? But now we got those options everywhere. But here I just mentioned farming is very well rooted in society. It's not only farming, it's there are a lot of things that are rooted in society in Iceland, and burning of fossil fuel is one of them, and it's really hard for people to accept changes. We humans, once we have gotten into a pattern, when something becomes convenient and sort of convenient for us to survive, really, we pick up a pattern from our parents. If they were burning fossil fuel, we will carry that on, and we will keep that tradition going, because they survived, they lived like that, and we can also do that, right? But now we are realizing that burning of fossil fuel is simply destroying our habitats, and we're looking at severe changes to our habitats here, and the sooner it stops, the better. But for my opinion, I see Icelanders, especially politicians, they talk a lot about the issue, but I don't feel like they're doing enough, though. There could be a whole lot more done, and it can surely be there's a whole lot more that can be done in Iceland, for sure. But we are doing well in our power source, but we're actually polluting more than most European nations, because we sell the source of energy to other nations. So yeah, that is, I think, what I have to say about Iceland, and give it back to you, Steve or Pat.
That's great. Let me go to the chat, and I know there are a few questions. Okay.
Yeah, I see them here. How has climate change affected native animals? Yeah, so we are seeing, I've seen 2 changes in my lifetime here up on land. We don't have that many mammals up on land, but in the ocean we do. And I've seen, though, just because I'm not much under the water, but surely there are more changes, but I've seen now mackerel entering the fishing territories here, species that didn't exist here, or they haven't been here that we know of. And of course, it's a big concern, because it can have a chain reaction on other species, adding or seeing new species getting into the cycles. And also up on land, seagulls are now eating worms and flies from the fields, something that they didn't do 20 years ago. This is happening, well, it can be happening because of climate change, but mostly because of human impact on the oceans, the pollution, the overfishing, and the acidity level rising for sure. I mean, this is all contributing to, and now seagulls are all over the fields. More questions here, wasn't there? Price per ton for the carbon changing.
You don't use tons, do you?
No, I don't know the price. No, it's actually really hard to find out any information about it's not out in the open, the numbers that we're getting paid for taking in the carbon credits, but from the amount that I heard, it was ridiculously low. But I'm not sure if that number that I have is correct, actually. So
I just Googled and got a price, which is complex actually, but one number stood out: $80 per ton for part of that offset. And that to me sounds like a reasonably high price.
Yeah, that's pretty high.
okay,
if it is correct, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
We buy offsets for our air travel, and I think the last time we paid $40 a ton, which is sort of medium, I guess. I've heard of people paying only $10 a ton, which is ridiculously low.
Here is a question: could you describe the specific of Iceland's tree planting agenda? There's both the government is spending money on it, as well as the largest power company in Iceland, which is run by the government actually. And now I don't remember, but they're planting a lot of many trees. But then interestingly is that they're doing a blend of a mixture of tree species together. Apparently they thrive better together if there are several species. And yeah, I don't have the numbers for that now. How many trees they're planting and so on.
We have some experience. We stayed at a ranch, and the group of us was assigned a duty of planting trees. 1/4 of a very large area, what was it, like 1,000 acres or equivalent, was going to be devoted, was sold to the government as a reserve for tree planting. And so they're getting all their guests to plant trees. So Pat and I each planted a tree.
Yeah, we planted them by hand though.
By hand.
We had a little device that dug a hole, and then we dropped these teeny tiny little trees into the hole. But that's not going to go very far.
But
one of our drivers said that his father, when he was a Boy Scout, and his father, you know, this guy is an adult, so his father is maybe 50, and he and his Boy Scout troop planted trees.
Oh, 30, and that's when we
40 years ago.
We actually passed the forest that he planted, his father planted. And it was a huge area. It looked like many acres. So it's a slow process.
But most of where we were driving by bus, most of the land was not covered with trees. There were just small areas that were covered with trees.
If I remember correctly, I believe that only 2% of Iceland is covered with trees, or less than 2%. I think I'm correct when I'm telling that. So there's a huge work to be done. We're also experiencing a lot of wind erosion because we don't have the trees that were native here, and we could get great windbreakers by planting a huge amount of trees. It would not only beneficial the environment, but also for us weatherly, because we would be getting less of the strong winds that we are always dealing with here.
Steve, do you remember how, and maybe Ingo knows this too, how deep the geothermal sources are and how deep they were digging? I believe it was several miles that they were digging to replace the gases into the rock.
Yeah, correct. There are several miles that they pumped them into the ground. The source of power, geothermal power, comes from a mile deep, usually, and actually in the north they didn't. There's a volcano called Krafla. They have a power station in the north on top of that volcano, and there they went just a little bit over a mile or 2 kilometers, and the bore that they were drilling for the hot water melted. So they went into the magma. So we got a lot of heat under the ground there. So it's usually about a mile, maybe a little further down than that.
Yeah, the station we visited, which was near Reykjavik, was about 1 mile, 6,000 feet deep, I believe, to get high pressure steam.
Yeah, is it affordable to switch to eating more vegetables in Iceland? Yes, we could be farming a whole lot more root vegetables. It's too cold for anything else on the surface, really, but under the surface, potatoes, turnips, these root vegetables would do well here, and they do well. But we're importing actually a lot of the potatoes that we're also using here in the market, which is just a shame. I mean, but it is affordable. Is the water?
We have some experience. We actually visited 2 greenhouses. They're heated with geothermal, so they're heated year round, and they're lit up in the winter, of course. And they import good topsoil to grow their vegetables and fruit. They actually bring in extra CO2 and inject that into the atmospheres, because some of the plants like tomatoes grow very much better with a higher CO2 concentration. And we actually ate
Steve, is this
good
your
meals.
email that we're seeing on the
Oh,
on the screen?
sorry, I didn't mean to share.
Yeah, you should unshare.
What am I?
We're looking at your email.
Oh,
Just stop
So-
sharing.
So yeah, I got more questions. Should I just carry on with the next ones, or like how are we on time? I have no idea.
Oh,
we're pretty
this is
close
not
to
your-
the end.
This is not your screen. This is somebody else, Steve. Can you override it?
I need to find participants.
No, all you have to do is share something and you'll stop sharing.
Okay. There we go.
Share your picture again.
Go back to the speaker.
Hold on. What can you see right now? What I'm going to do.
All right. I can see Steve Miller has started screen sharing.
Okay.
Now you can just undo it. You can just stop sharing and let Ingo,
Oh, they're good. Yes. Okay. There you go.
or maybe he's done.
I can carry on. There are more questions if you want. I don't know how we're on time. You decide. I mean,
If there's
the
just
water
another question or so, we ought to just answer that right now.
Yeah, is the water pumped back into the ground from the geothermal plants and the electricity production a problem? Generally not, but it can cause small earthquakes. How deep is the source of geothermal sources? Yeah, it's like maybe a mile down, a little over a mile. Is there understanding what Iceland house winter temperature would require additional expansion? No. Yeah, true. We've answered that already. How widespread are bidets in Iceland? We don't have that many of those, unfortunately. Which is sad. We have all this really good hot water. You say bidets? How do you pronounce that?
It's pronounced bidet.
Bidet. Sorry, yeah. So we ought to have a whole lot more of them, but unfortunately we're just way behind, and it should be regulated as right now, for my opinion. For we have so much of hot water to use. We take long showers without worrying about the cost. Yeah, tree planting needs. Good. Any more questions here?
I think we're getting up to time.
Yes.
And we have way more questions than we can answer now. Why don't we, Ingo, we really thank you for all the information that you've given us, and remind everyone that it's 4 hours later in Iceland. So
And you have
so
work tomorrow.
you're definitely allowed to drop off whenever you want to. And we have only one more speaker now, which is going to be Dean Nielsen. And
I had
we'll do the same thing. He's going to talk about what. Well, Steve, you go ahead.
Yeah. So we're pleased to have Jennifer and Dean talking about greening of their own house, and we'll hear a lot about that. Interesting. I was had a discussion with Jennifer just a week ago. She tabled in downtown Maplewood, and found that people would not stop to chat. They had to mostly force brochure into their hands. May I give you information about free energy audits to reduce your utility bills and energy use? I was very interested in that, because we're going to be doing the same. We're tabling in a week, next Saturday, and I hope we have a better reception, but I'm afraid the same sort of thing is going to happen. You have to go out and capture people to come and talk to us at our booth.
I should revise that, because we've done it twice now.
Oh, good.
And there is a lot of receptivity. I would say a majority of people at least accepted the brochure.
Super. I'm glad to hear that. With that, I'll turn it over to you two.
And I'm going to let Dean take the lead.
Yes. Hello, I'm Dean Nielsen. I'm not an environmental scientist. I'm at best a concerned consumer, and I'm also on my wife's shirt tails a lot. So she has drawn me into this realm. But I have to say that I've been listening to the important conclusions about the condition of our planet. And the thing that really rocked me was early on Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth presentation. And my goodness, I learned all the CO2 that was going into the atmosphere. And we immediately from there, we went right out and bought ourselves a hybrid car. And here's the thing, and this is kind of the theme of my consuming. The car dealer said, yeah, you can buy this and you can save some money, but you'll probably not get a return on your investment. And I thought, well, yeah, but I'm actually investing in the environment, and that return is more important than the cash I might be experiencing by buying a cheaper car. So that kind of has sort of informed our choices since then. And when we decided to move from Maplewood to Morristown, we got into a house that had a heating and cooling system that was full of heat and air conditioning ducts and an infrastructure that we could use for shifting to an electric house. And that's also kind of sort of like the message I got from Al Gore. Someone said, I can't remember who, electrify your house. And I had no idea what that meant, but that sounded really attractive. And so the first thing we tried to do actually is we looked at geothermal. We thought we could electrify our house sort of like the Icelandians, except that our geothermal is not so prevalent. And we had an estimator come over to the house and said, yes, I can do geothermal electricity for you, but it will cost you about $50,000. Well, you know, I'm not into sort of recovering my investment, but we didn't have $50,000 for this kind of investment. In fact, he was also going to dig a couple of very large holes in our backyard and had to access it through somebody else's yard. And it was really daunting. So we looked at the other options, and mainly we saw the heat pump option. Now, we weren't doing this in any kind of, sophisticated scientific search. We just looked in the, essentially the Google, we essentially Googled groups that did in our town heat pumps, and we found a group called Service Professionals. And when they came out and looked at our house, they said, yeah, sure, we can do this. We've done this a lot, but by the way, you're probably not going to be able to get returns on your investment. And once again, I said to this man, hey, that's not what we're into. We're into getting out of oil. And we're not really all that concerned about how much it's going to cost us. Well, we had a system installed. The system was at first going to have a sort of an oil backup for when it got extremely cold, but we halfway through found a new appliance, a Fujitsu inverter. Its model was called Halcyon, which had a built-in coil that allowed it to heat our house even down below 5 degrees, an outside temperature below 5 degrees. So that put our price up a little bit, but we were told that we would actually probably maybe come out cheaper with our heat pump. And we tried to do the math. And I only was able to get 1 month's worth of comparison because we're in Central Jersey Power and Light, and they don't read our meter. We've had 1 meter reading or 3 meter readings in the last 13 months. And when you have an estimated meter reading, and that happens for 3 or 4 months, when you finally have it read, they're mainly collecting in that red, the meter red month, all of the underestimations that they had the previous month. So you really don't know how much you're spending in this part of New Jersey. But I did one estimation, and it seems like that we were almost the same, maybe $9 or $10 less than our previous gas oil situation. Listen, we love our system. It keeps us warm, it keeps us cool, and it keeps us feeling like we're in this game of getting out of fossil fuels. I have to say that I have electric everything now, even my toothbrush. But we also have an electric car, I have an electric bicycle, we have an electric lawnmower, chainsaw, everything you can think is electrified. So, except for my spouse and my children.
And I would like to give a real big promotion for the Bolt. We have a Chevy Bolt. It was very affordable. It is the funnest thing to drive. and the best car we ever bought. And we did install the medium. There are 3 levels of charger. We have the medium charger, but it charges the car overnight. And another point I'd just like to add is that there are tremendous health benefits from getting out of gas in your home. Most importantly, to change a gas stove to electric, because the fumes are really toxic. I wish I had known that when my kids were young. We had gas stoves all their childhood. And when they came in to install our electric system, they happened to notice that the gas system was leaking. It was a brand new system and it was leaking gas, and it was a hazard, and we would never even have noticed it if we hadn't decided we wanted to make this change. So there are hidden risks out there as well. And I think that's our
talk about our stove.
Oh yeah, we even went beyond an electric stove to get an induction stove, and it's a dream, an absolute dream to cook on. It heats things really fast. Nothing, rarely burns. The pots clean beautifully, and it's just a great pleasure. Yeah. So we happy to answer any questions, but that's our story.
I see several questions. Pat, are you tracking them?
Well, I only see 2 right now for Dean and Jennifer. The 2 are, have you had an issue keeping warm with the heat pump when it gets below freezing? And the second one was, how many estimates did you get for the heat pump?
Yeah, the first one is that's exactly what this new model of Fujitsu inverters has done for us. We can heat the house with the heat pump even in temperatures around 0. And we haven't felt any shortage of heating in the deepest winters that we've had. We haven't had any real deep cold winters, but I think that what happens is there's a coil that's next to the main heat pump that kicks in and heats, puts additional heat, something like a toaster. About how many?
10 degrees.
5.
Mhm.
How many estimates do we have? 2. The thing is that I looked all over this part of New Jersey, and there were very few people that were selling heat pumps at that time and installing them. So we had two estimators. I think we probably could have done better, but our service professionals are visiting us every 6 months to check on the functioning of the system, and they've been very, very good post-purchase servicing.
And I just saw a question flash about our electrical panel. I think we did have to upgrade the electrical panel to get the electric system, right?
No, we didn't. We had a new panel, and we just found a space to put in the additional circuits, and it wasn't anything that required anything more than the regular wiring of a new appliance.
Oh, that's great. Now we're getting several questions. I think you answered this, whether it's air source or ground source. You got air source because the ground source was $50,000.
And would have probably permanently alienated our next door neighbor.
Yeah, we had to go through. We said, "Oh, it's okay. We can just drive through his backyard and dug 2 massive holes." It was like the person who offered us solar energy if we cut down 7 trees.
Do you have the name of the company that installed the heat pump?
Yeah, it's, as I said, it's called Service Professionals.
Oh, yes, you did say
They're
that.
quite large in Morris County.
And did you do the insulation? You must have, because you're giving brochures out on this, but insulation and air sealing.
Yeah, that came before just before our installation of our heat pump system. And together, I think we've got a pretty tight system now.
I will say that the green energy audit and the work that they recommended, that was also quite expensive. And I've had some conversations with Maplewood colleagues who say that you'd really need to shop around for the companies that do your implement the upgrades for your home, because a lot of them are overcharging because there are these good government subsidies. So they figure that they can charge higher rates to do the work because
so they're taking the subsidies.
Yeah.
Basically. I had a couple of people I think mentioned, do you have solar to offset some of the cost? And I'm thinking you would have mentioned that if you did.
We have a couple of solar lamps, and that's about it. We would have gotten more into solar, but we have enormous 100-foot trees around us, and we just didn't want to sort of lose that carbon absorber.
We had solar panels in Maplewood. The home was angled in a way that allowed it, and this was a number of years ago, but Dean was so persistent that he kept trying again. They kept telling us, no, you don't have enough exposure on your roof, and that the systems are getting so much more efficient that you can do it now with even if you have some shade, but not in this current house.
Another option that someone has mentioned is community solar.
Yeah.
And I know you're in JCP&L, so are we. We're looking into that, and it's not quite available yet, although I have heard that it's available in PSE&G territory. But
yeah,
we would like to do that when it's available in JCP&L.
Yeah, I learned about solar landscape from Steve Miller, and everybody should go check out and see if there's a slot available in their area, because that is a fabulous solution, and it's cheaper and it's 100% green.
Can I mention? Can I put on a footnote on my own presentation?
Sure.
What I forgot to mention is that before we went to the heat pump, we also did a shift in our utilities and put ourselves into the Inspire green energy option that is billed through our JCP&L, but it is 100% green energy. So we not only are using electricity, but our electricity is made by the sun and by wind.
Okay. Yeah. We do that too. I think that's the best option that we have now. The only downside of that is that it's probably coming from far away.
Yeah,
and
more expensive than.
And once the community gets here, that'll be local. So that would be better for us.
And it's certifiably green.
Oh yeah.
Some of these are.
You know exactly where it's coming from.
Right. The car
Someone,
charger, how much is the car charger? Or was it 1,000, 1,500?
Our car charger costs about $750. And installation of it, because it's you know, a 220 system, and it's got to be a special sort of electrician, was another $750. So it was about $1,500 for our charger. But we couldn't live without it. And
we all appreciate that.
yeah.
that you're going that mile.
And we took it with us when we changed houses. So
Yeah.
Oh,
it's an investment you own.
that's great.
I have 8:05 right now.
Yeah. So I guess we should call it.
Yeah. Thank you, Dean and Jennifer. A very interesting story. We've let this run longer on the first speaker, especially because our third speaker was called tonight just back to work, and he could not make the meeting tonight. So we were planning to have him at a later meeting because he has a great story. He installed a ground source heat pump, solar panels, energy storage, the works for his house. So if you tune in on October 20th. Also on October 20th, Scott Nelson is going to come back to us. Earlier this year, he gave his presentation. He's the owner of a large HVAC service company with a large fleet of trucks in, I think it's Ocean, New Jersey. He's past president of the North Jersey ACCA Professional Association, currently an ACC, that's a professional association for HVAC, certainly on the board. And he provides service to most of central New Jersey and ensures his employees are well trained with the latest technology. Same was true of last month. We had a service professional owner of a business, and he serviced northern New Jersey. I think we're covering, and he was really good, and he knew what to recommend and answered everybody's questions. I think we're covering New Jersey with the service professionals. So keep tuning in to our monthly webinars. Next one, October 20th. And that's all we have for tonight. We look forward to seeing you in a month.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much. It's a great show.
Thank you. Great job. Keep it up.